They took the bar!
The "they" would be the US government in this case. Prohibition lasted 13 years, and that was just enough time to create a new sport, NASCAR. We'll explain. Let's begin at the source, or rather the still. Making homemade liquor or moonshine, super, even dangerously strong spirits distilled from corn was a very old process. A lot of the stuff was made in the southeastern US, and when Prohibition hit, many backyard distillers scaled up their operations with an eye toward distributing their product more widely. The drivers who smuggled the stuff were known as whiskey trippers. Now, if you've never driven through the American South, there are mind-numbingly large rural expanses as well as hilly mountainous areas where the roads are winding and treacherous. It's hard enough for drivers going the speed limit, let alone those trying to avoid detection or lose police or federal agents in hot pursuit because they were carrying illegal booze.
What do you got here?
I don't know. It ain't mine.
It ain't yours, is it? Well, whose is it?
Whiskey trippers needed their contraband-packed cars to go as fast as possible, creating an all-new racing culture that would one day morph into professional stock car racing. Nobody got paid if the feds confiscated their booze, so crafty drivers altered their cars, which were primarily stock models made by major American automobile manufacturers. They needed more speed and power, so bootleggers conspired with mechanics to coax just a little more power out of their engines, not to mention better handling on challenging country roads.
Well, you have to change the engine, build it up a little, get your right gears, right tires, several little secrets.
To avoid weighing their car down with so much moonshine that their speed was compromised, mechanics would sub in heavy-duty suspension parts.
Go out in the junkyard and find what you could rig up to do the best job.
They might also remove the vehicle's interior components to reduce weight and make more room for booze. Steel plates drilled into radiators protected the engines from police gunfire, and some even added exterior compartments used to dump oil or nails on the road to slow down their pursuers. And they did it just like some James Bond film.
They had a lever they could pull to spill oil out on the highway.
Today's NASCAR rigs are as aerodynamic as possible, with nothing to produce drag. That's not too different from the bootleg era practice of taking off windshield wipers and covering the spaces around headlights. See where we're going with this? These modified automobiles are the direct predecessor of the expertly engineered super-fast NASCAR vehicles of the late 20th century and beyond. And it was bootleggers who started it.
They were speed junkies. Honestly, I think that the moonshiner trippers back in the day, they wanted to be chased.
Can't really blame them. By the early 1930s, bootleggers' cars were becoming legendary. Homegrown ingenuity was regularly outsmarting and outgunning local and federal authorities, and the souped-up vehicles started to come out of the shadows. Fairgrounds and racetracks began to host moonshine car contests. While they weren't on whiskey runs, drivers in places like Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia would gather to see which of their tough, speedy rides was the toughest and speediest. It turned out the general public was totally into it. Early amateur stock car races drew big crowds who were excited to check out the custom cars and their daring drivers. And when Prohibition ended in 1933, stock car racing went legit. The vehicles modded out of necessity for the job at hand could now be used solely for racing. Prohibition was not only deeply unpopular, but it also sparked a serious rise in crime, and few were sorry when in December 1933 it was repealed with the 21st Amendment. Booze may have been legal again, but it didn't put an end to moonshine production, nor to the drivers ferrying it around in their jacked-up automobiles. See, there was a catch. The alcohol industry had been legitimized on the federal level, but now it was taxed, heavily taxed at that. That didn't go over too well with the bootleggers, many of whom made serious bank on the black market. As NASCAR historian Neil Thompson put it, moonshiners didn't want to share the tax revenue or any of this enterprise they had built from scratch. Not only that, even though the 21st Amendment legalized alcohol on the national level, local governments could still decide whether or not to allow the sale or production of booze in their jurisdictions. In an effort to curtail the crime or moral turpitude associated with the consumption of alcohol, many counties in the South chose to remain dry even after Prohibition. Some of them remain so to this day, and if you're wondering how many are left, well, that number is sometimes hard to determine. Within counties, cities can also enact restrictions on alcohol. And then there's partially dry counties. They allow maybe beer or wine, but not hard alcohol, so it's complicated. Anyway, back to the bootleggers. This meant continued employment for whiskey trippers and moonshiners during the 1930s and 40s, and they kept using their very fast, very powerful cars to race on through. In 1932, Ford introduced the V8 engine. Bonnie and Clyde's getaway car was actually V8 powered. In fact, it was the favorite engine of plenty of not-so-upstanding citizens whose professions required quick getaways. What made the V8 so special was that it provided power and strength as well as speed. It turned a regular automobile into one of the fastest on the market, capable of speeds exceeding those of standard-issue police cars, and it could handle a lot of wear and tear without sacrificing performance, including rocky mountain roads. The first V8-powered Fords were larger models with more roomy trunks and back seats, meaning more room for moonshine. Needless to say, the new V8 cars were a natural choice for drivers on the amateur circuits that preceded NASCAR. As the 1930s wore on, stock car racing divorced itself from bootlegging to the point that public events began to pop up in high-profile, high-capacity venues. In 1936, the Daytona Beach Road Course in Florida hosted the first official stock car race for paying customers. And no, you're not seeing things. Yes, they raced partially on the beach back then. It was in Ponce Inlet, just a bit south of Daytona Beach. 2 years later, a whopping 20,000 people showed up at the Lakewood Speedway in Atlanta to watch what's considered the first major stock car race.
Race fans and moonshine fans are one and the same.
Development of the sport slowed considerably during World War II, but stock car racing picked up again in 1945. That year, after a near riot broke out at Lakewood Speedway when local police barred 5 drivers from competing, those drivers were allowed to race. The reason for the near ban? They'd all been previously convicted on charges related to bootlegging and liquor running. You probably would have considered those convictions to be qualifications.
When NASCAR started, you would drive your car to the track and hope it was able to drive it back.
Atlanta had been a center for bootlegging and thus early stock car racing, but the 1945 Lakewood incident ended all that, so the sport simply relocated to the Carolinas and Virginia. That's where driver Bill France Sr. gathered together a group of drivers, mechanics, and private funders to race their vehicles, many of whom had backgrounds in, no surprise, bootlegging. In 1947, France and others wrote up the rules that would govern the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, or NASCAR, which got underway in 1948.
Right now, within our group, rests the outcome of stock car racing in the country today.
So let's meet some of the early drivers. Born in Georgia in 1914, Raymond Parks was arrested as a kid and served 3 months behind bars for the crime of attempting to purchase corn whiskey for his father. He was 14 when he got out and went to work for a bootlegger outside Atlanta before starting his own liquor running business, carrying contraband from hhis hometown of Dawsonville to businesses in Atlanta about 60 miles away. Business boomed, and before long, Parks oversaw a whole team of drivers and their souped-up cars. So many southern counties were dry after Prohibition ended that Parks' business thrived until he was busted in the mid-30s and spent 9 months in federal prison. Parks invested his liquor money in legal ventures like vending machines, jukeboxes, and sponsoring drivers in amateur races around the South. He even loaned money to Bill France to help him get NASCAR off the ground, and he was at the 1947 Daytona Beach meetings that formally established the league. Credited as the first NASCAR team owner, Parks sponsored 2 early champions, Bonte Flock and Red Byron. Louis Vogt, better known as Red Vogt, began working on cars professionally in 1915. He was just 11 when he got a job as a mechanic at a Cadillac dealership in Washington, D.C. In his free time, he and his close friend Bill France raced cars and motorcycles. Vogt won multiple motorcycle racing titles by the 1920s, but he was seriously hurt in a pair of crashes along the way. During Prohibition, an Atlanta booze kingpin named Peachtree Williams hired Vogt to build, repair, maintain, and fortify his delivery vehicles. He was so good at it that other bootleggers soon sought him out. Vogt's cars were durable and fast, and 2 of his first clients were moonshiners Lightning Lloyd C. and Rapid Roy Hall. When they moved into stock car racing, they brought along Vogt as their mechanic. Vogt was there for the first NASCAR championship in 1948, and he's credited with coming up with the name, the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing.
NASCAR.
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 Now, there was a substantial overlap between early NASCAR drivers and whiskey trippers by virtue of the shared skill set. For example, Curtis Turner started making hooch at the age of 9, and he claimed he'd made $1 million by the time he hit 20. In the inaugural NASCAR Strictly Stock Series races in 1949, Turner finished in 6th place, and he'd go on to win 17 events over a 20-season career. After serving in World War II, Wendell Scott became a mechanic and moonshine runner, operating out of the hooch hotbed of Franklin County, Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He began stock car racing in 1952, winning 120 races before he moved up to NASCAR, becoming the organization's first black driver. Future Motorsports Hall of Fame of America inductee Tim Flock followed his brothers into bootlegging. Flock specialized in long-distance runs, making deliveries between Atlanta and Alabama. In 1939, Bob and Fonzie Flock took the very same Ford coupes they'd used to run moonshine and entered them in a 100-mile race at the Lakewood Speedway in Atlanta. They lost to bootlegger Roy Hall. By the late 1940s, the three Flying Flocks were among auto racing's earliest stars and flagship members of NASCAR.
Moonshine hauling was more exciting than racing.
Junior Johnson sure knows that for a fact. Johnson's family had been making moonshine since the late 1800s. In 1935, authorities seized 7,000 gallons of illegally made whiskey from the Johnson farm in North Carolina, the largest bust of that nature up to that time. When he came of age, Johnson's driving skills came in handy, making booze runs for his father. Speaking to the BBC, he explained it all, saying, "You had to have fast cars to haul your whiskey to the people and to get away from the revenue and the ABC and the federal officers."
You never let your guard down because you could bet there was something in store for you every time you left out.
Johnson was talking about the years after Prohibition, during which he ran booze while eluding tax agents and the alcoholic beverage control. He was pretty cunning. He put a siren and a light on his car to trick other bootleggers into thinking he was the law. Johnson was reportedly such a speedy and evasive driver that he was never once captured by police on any of his moonshine deliveries. That translated to a tremendous aptitude for formal auto racing, and he made his NASCAR debut in 1953. In 1956, after he was already a star in his sport, Johnson was arrested and convicted on charges related to running an illegal still. Not just any still.
And it was a 20,000-gallon still, the largest still ever been seen.
A similar device sits on the NASCAR Hall of Fame's Heritage Speedway, constructed and donated by Johnson, one of the first people inducted into the hall in 2010. From outrunning the law to cars peppered with sponsorships, NASCAR has come full circle. No pun intended, from those early days running whiskey.